Okay, so we're going to readdress this, if you like, methodos that we began in the talk previous to this one on is Trump to be in some way identified as a man of lawlessness. But this time, let's first of all let's remember the primary thing we're thinking about, of course, is this type of questions like what exactly does it mean that Heidegger has set aside the current Dasein? What is this Geheimnis, Wissen, or secret knowledge in this this Stellung of Heidegger, this Heimat of Heidegger, that is as it were in the nomoi, or in the choice-making capacity of the paths leading forward. Which, let's just, in order to give that some clarity, there's one version of choice-making capacity is producing some kind of probability expectation, and then by graphing the results, and then by saying these are the ones in the bell curve and these are the outliers. So then there's another way of trying to do expectation, which Epstein said this is what people that are good at understanding when to make bets on the foreign exchange, or the markets more generally. From the Matrix factors, I mean, like from the, there's a thing within the Matrix movie where the guy's saying, that's the girl in the red dress, but I don't need to see her because I read the code, and I don't need the guy's primitive way of representing these issues, but when I read the code, it's like this is already the thing the thing itself. So there's, several ways to represent this type of issue of how is the future, so-called future, addressed out of the present. One is this rationalistic way of the probability tables. Another is this sort of sensation, if you like, that Epstein is alluding to, and some traders have, where the other people sense it. They think that here's the double, they talk about this type of double spike, which is like indicates a certain formation that you have your, if you're an investor. It's like, it's spiked once. Now it's going to go down a little bit. It's a spike again. It's a certain formation, and then you might have a gut feeling that it's going to be a double spike formation, or whatever it looks like in the candlestick version. But except for certain individuals, most people fall back into rationalization at this point. The Epstein said, well, there's some people that are somehow both sense this, and they're cool enough to where they could say, okay, here's a couple rational considerations, but then they kind of say, okay, I trust my initial sense of what's happening here. So there's this type of way of judging the future, and happens in various ways. But when we're talking about Trump here, what we're talking about is in the most, in the light, let's say in the light of being, is it that so we're transferring the notion of the lawlessness, but instead and the nomoi, but instead we're taking it to the level of this question of as it were, the light, the Dulphine, this thrownness, the light in which we take decisions according to ways that have already been previously sort of set up and regarded as making sense. And then you can in this way regard Trump, because he's sort of a sensation type, because he does something more like those traders who sort of trust their instincts on things most people aren't paying attention to, like the fluctuations of those candlesticks on the markets. In this way, is Trump therefore deepening in a certain way, even though you could say by the old standards, you judge by the old standard, you say, oh, there's neocons, there's Atlanticists, there's this project of the Western Alliance, there's somebody called James A. Angleton, there's a matter of survival, there's a matter that CIA has decided for a long time. These are the main rivals. This is named under the Obama administration, China and Russia. They have this, not that quadrennial or whatever thing, but they have another thing that comes out every so often, and usually under every president, I think. And in Obama's, he created this notion of the great power rivalry, and that our great power rivals were Russia and China. And then this was sort of the advertising version of it, the entertainment advertising version of it, and then immediately amongst the serious people, it was clarified that I think the name of the document was something like, "These are our goals in our defense posture," or something like that. This is what we're striving for, or something like that. So, and then immediately it was clarified by the more serious people that being involved in a great power rivalry is not a goal. It's not something we're trying to do. It's like, so in other words, it was clarified that winning is what we're actually trying to do. So, which means that one could imagine the following. We wreck the Operation Timber Sycamore, we wreck Syria, and then of course Libya. But what about Russia, it said? Well, how do we wreck Russia? How do we reduce it so Russia is just a totally useless wasteland? The ports are destroyed. Maybe there's some, nuclear power plants are destroyed, but there's a lot of pollution of oil because Ukraine has been hitting a bunch of oil refineries. And everything's totally wasted, useless. Not a war of attrition, but rather a war of making the territory, the war of making your environmental niche, as it were, the whole of Russia, untenable to live in, as it were. Well, Russia really only has 2 big population cities, I think. But yeah, if we just look at it that way, then we could easily say, oh yeah, Trump is taking part in this. So then Trump is not, then he's not the man of lawlessness at all. He's simply following the most powerful nomos of the Western Alliance, which regards itself in a total war of survival, as James Angleton understood it. So, the question is, do we superimpose this old notion that, after all, Trump doesn't really know about or care about? We could say, Trump, he grew up under that system, is unconsciously, that's the way he thinks. And anyway, even if he didn't, the men in suits or whatever, the CIA or whoever, would have put him in the right direction because they know quite a few psychological techniques. And they would have done some an extractive interjection, and that is, so then, therefore, that's why Trump is doing this. But on the other hand, we could say, no, Trump is a Hercules type, and therefore his character is active, and his character is doing something more like what those traitors do, and as Epstein described them, and that they fasten on certain sensations and take them more seriously than others do, and then weigh them up in some rational way. It's just that they're weighing sensations that are different than what most people take seriously, and are able to sort of give a little bit of rational guidance to, as the traders do with those, as I said, with this double blip formations or whatever formations they might think they intuit when looking at the movements of the big indexes or whatever the foreign exchange. When looking at the movement of the Turkish lira as against the dollar, or something less pathetic maybe. But in any case, so the question I'm saying is, one, we couldn't prove that it's wrong that Trump is this other figure by saying, oh, look, he's following the standard script and so on, because then we would be as it were, self-indoctrinated, stupid, because we would just have the frame, we would just assume that this is the level of reality, this geopolitical strategy is the level of reality, and that's all that matters. No, because we could also see, even though Trump's acts at that level totally correspond to the view that has been woven into the standard primacist stratagem associated with I'll give you the Kagan, in this inverted dark moment, as I was saying a while ago, sort of all these people came awake to this Fukuyama, and everybody that now all our former allies are our enemies, or if not our enemies, they're sort of like out of sorts with us, and then but our former enemies are now supposed to be, because at that time they were saying, Trump and the Russiagate stuff, they're saying, now Russia and other, I guess he meant also all the other states with sheikhs or whatever, princeletes or whatever, that Trump was so happy to be in contact with, everything had switched around. So there was a sudden moment when Robert Kagan recognized this, and he says, Trump has gone off his rockers. I can't, there's some things, like the guy says in Lost Highway, there's some things, Pete, I'm sorry about that, but I can't tolerate, if there's one thing I can't tolerate, it's this type of bad driving, how was it in the thing, I guess it was tailgating. Is that the right way to put it? That's the word for eating and drinking and partying before a football game. That's the same thing as driving too close to somebody when you're driving. I forget the right term, but I think of this interpretation of that in Zizek, is he says what the character wanted is in some very primitive way to establish some kind of order. You need a certain number of car lengths, to be able for your braking time to be sufficient, so that the tailgater is ruining these possibilities of taking advantage of our so-called rational knowledge. The things that we could apply through a method, as Descartes wants to apply things, and then no longer do we have to consider the matter of the qualities or some kind of personal responses to become technical problems. So let's try to get to the level where we could ask, is Trump breaking up some type of basic structures? So Heidegger said with respect to Descartes, that Descartes is mixed up, and that he's saying cogito sum. He's prefiguring cognition or perception of some kind, without knowing what being is, that he should say sum cogito. So then the Ereignis, or the Lichtung, if you like, it's clear it doesn't always have to start with this type of question about cognition, perception, especially perception as prefigured or as given in a presupposition. And then as the dream, and then it's as though to say, from the point of view of thinking, all perception is like a dream. Where the question about the idea is settled by noting that the dream has no real dimensions, but is totally ideal. Start with that as what everything's like. So then, therefore, Heidegger's saying Descartes has a big presupposition about what cognition is, what perception is, that there is cognition, that there is perception. And he puts this all prior to asking the question. He's saying, this is, no matter what this is, what he's describing, what Descartes is describing, that something's seen, but that is, it has an ideal content because it's on the same level as a dream, where a dream has no external reality, no it's sort of a paradoxical thought that if you enter into it, then the so-called external becomes explained by the ideal as being not part of the world. But so what's the basic idea there? It's like the idea is, the Greek miracle is everything was lit by the intelligence. So the sun is like the intelligence. But the point is that the sun, or the intelligence which lights everything, this kind of perception, is basically different from the thing that it lights. Yes? So the question of this Dasein, that's the end is, for instance. These questions about the one and the many are questions about, we're still in a certain relationship to a notion about the light in which everything appears, its being, and all the things that appear. Just as the sun, because the sun, there's all kinds of different things that appear, but none of them are the sun. I mean, I don't know, that's unclear. I mean, is it when I look at the brightness of the sun reflecting off the windows, do I see the sun? I suppose I do. So even the sun is sort of, in a way, one of the things. So just as the intelligence and talk about nous is, in a way, sort of here. Yeah, so Heidegger is saying, Descartes' way, which is actually the most prevalent way today, is it prefigures some things, or it has presuppositions, which we could operate an analysis on and bring into the light, as it were, because it's unhealthy to leave them suppressed, like at the level of Piers Morgan or something like that. You got to show. I wondered when I watched this, are we, at least at the level of Jean-Paul Sartre, are we in hell? Because the guy brings on a guest, propounded all this stuff about how brilliant he is, and then the guy comes out and he says, isn't it a scandal that people are for Marx and Marx is against private property? And are we at the? And Zizek just sits there, like a baby. He doesn't say anything. He's so polite. He doesn't want to get into any. Or maybe he's just like. I think it's like a matter of lack of intellectual courage, because it's like he doesn't want to get into any problem where somebody could accuse him of being too subtle, or of taking up some kind of non-real world question, such as the question of what was Marx's teaching? Was Marx against private property? So we couldn't even settle that. I think we must be in hell if the level of discourse is that we can't even settle that, when it's patently clear, Marx was against private property because he considered private property one way of handling property. He had another thing he called personal property. So it's like these people, for the whole of my life, have heard this, is they continually absolutely have parties that continually refuse to even admit this most simple things, and the wide majority of them don't even know that there's a problem. Marx is against private property because he thinks private property means property doled out by the business interests. They decide how much your money is worth. That's private property. That's what he's against. He's for personal property because he thinks personal property is what happens when people get paid what they ought to get paid, and they're not getting gouged, or they're not getting dominated, to put it more clearly, by the business interests. So that Marx is exactly the same theory, by the way, as Adam Smith, except that he adds that one bit to it. He just says that because everything Smith said was correct, only there's this one problem. There's not, the markets aren't really free because there's this kingdom of Epstein, and so on and so forth. But what my basic point here is we couldn't even settle these tiny little problems. But what if at this other level? So let's go. Remember, we're talking about the man of lawlessness, or the I think it's ἀνθρώπος tes nomoias. and there we had this nomos issue, but let's try to, and there it's sort of like, you have to remember, this is another thing that was so idiotic on Piers Morgan. It was like, first he acts like, oh, there's no analogy between Mussolini, Hitler, and Trump, because Mussolini and Hitler were great lawbreakers, whereas Trump, look at it, he pushes things as hard as he can, but he stays within the law. That's exactly how, nicely overlooking that he suborned Pence. Now, okay, that's actually, I would give it to him that okay, he didn't suborn Pence. I would agree. That's exactly what he means. So I think that's exactly the essence of what Morgan means. He says that Pence don't accept the envelopes from the delegates. Don't accept them because you have not just this ministerial, you just go, you pick them up, they take some photographs. No, you have a substantive duty to consider maybe there's something or fishy about this situation with the election fraud. Do not accept those. This is when Trump 45 was about to go out of office. Don't accept those envelopes. Okay, so this is what Morgan's saying. Trump just pushes things. He just pushes things. It doesn't go beyond the law. I mean, whether these questions of moral turpitude in themselves, sort of, which would disbar the lawyer, what they mean with respect to whether an officer of the United States is still able to perform their duty is another question. And some subtle questions would come in. But I think the basic issue is that what Zizek should have mentioned is like, remember, almost everything that I think everything that Mussolini did was legal. I mean, before he got in office, like they had some thugs going around doing stuff. Maybe that's what they meant. But once he was, the things that they did that were really bad, and not just, as Zizek put it, not just at the level of thugs, but at the level of professional, at a professional level of running a concentration camp or whatever. That's when it gets, or of one running a for-profit part of the kingdom of Epstein, for-profit prisons, as we have in America. This is a different level. Zizek says Vance will be the level above Trump and much worse. So again, let's look at this. Those are all sort of questions of law, but again, I would say, Piers Morgan is totally crazy here because he forgets that the Nuremberg defense is basically like, most everyone that did horrible things in Nazi Germany was following actual laws and acted totally lawfully, and even Kant was invoked, by Eichmann. And rightly invoked, I would say. Even though, Arendt says they're not rightly invoked, but I would say rightly invoked. Because Kant said obey. He said you can, talk all you want, complain, argue, but you have to obey the law of the land. Kant did. So, I mean, no, I don't accept this Arendt's sort of anti-Eichmann statement so far as Eichmann didn't know his Kant. I think Eichmann did know his Kant. All that's sort of at the legal level, but I just think that was sort of shameful that Piers would get that wrong, because that's the whole point. If Trump changes enough laws, he gets enough of the military on his side, changes enough laws, and then because the nomoi, the man of nomoi, the man of customs, is the one that can also say, let's relax this law here, let's relax the enforcement of that law there, but which would only work when he has people that are willing to relax the enforcement in those ways, people that are in some way take his authority to be real, actual. Yeah, then you could get a normal version of Trump as the man of lawlessness, because he's changing all kinds of different practices amongst Article 1, the parts of Article 1, right, and especially including the military. So that's the guy, one of the worst guys, Timothy Snyder, and also Paul Krugman repeated it. They keep saying, yeah, Trump is changing out all the main, all these personnel in the Pentagon, and he's getting ready to stage a coup. I think, though, one should remember that, again, it's more power. It's like Boris Groys would say, it's not exactly the same thing. The United States is not exactly the same thing as some kind of cartel or something like that, because the reason is the beauty. There's a sort of beautiful factor, the beauty of the law. It keeps people sort of in hope. It keeps people sort of like, so Zizek took this position for a long time and said, fake it till you make it position on universal human rights. And he kept saying, and then, for example, I mean, the most obvious example is the clear, I know it's embarrassing to the founders themselves, out and out cynical deception in the founding statement that all men are created equal, and et cetera, but then you're admitting the slave states and the compromise and all that stuff. So yeah, we have this position where we could judge Trump's lawlessness as abnormal, but there's another one I think it's interesting to superimpose over that, which has more depth and is closer to the radicality that Heidegger is tries to give an avenue of invasion into. Let's look at it from this Antigone, in the beginning of Sophocles' Antigone, where they're talking about everything is sort of, there's all this Unheimlich are sort of creepy, dreadful things in the earth, but the human being is the most Unheimlich of them all. There's this speaking about this. Hidden knowledge of Heidegger, which links up to the word Heimat, because the home, the Heimat, and the Heimness have a etymological connection. They conceal. There's things that in a way conceal, and that of course we could point people at this moment to Heidegger's works on architecture. Of course, he said these works aren't about principles of architecture, but what are they about? They're about things like this building and dwelling in this sense, that the Heimat is and the concealment and unconcealment are about where we dwell in a basic way. And then there's a type of decision making that happens at this level of the Heimat and the... So, I mean, for instance, Heidegger gives the example that the giving flowers, it has a certain... It's something that happens in the world, but it doesn't happen for physics. For physics, or even for... It doesn't happen for, like, the scientific name of the plant that we call a flower, rhododendron, whatever. It's different the way the sciences take up each of these objects. And then there's the question of sort of like, how is the person related to the... where is the person given? Is it somehow in the philosophic zombie problem, or like where you just see the material face of a robot, but then behind it you have to wonder if there's something else? Or is it when you're actually seeing a human being, you're actually seeing various comportments and so on? I mean, that somebody's crying, for instance, and then one would say, well, they're an actress or whatever. And then, oh, those are crocodile tears. The splitting off of the motive and the thing seen, like what's the evidence for that? Oh, well, I just had a feeling about it. It looks like crocodile tears. Yeah, this questions, they form this sort of separation that our legal system is based on, because like this jury isn't supposed to find out about the mens rea, but about this the deeds that happened. But again, we're trying to think this from the point of view of Trump on a larger scale. But let's get this saying from Sophocles. How is it? The ἀνθρώπου δεινότερον. Ἀνθρώπου δεινότερον. Okay, so we recognize the first word as a form of the sort of like ἀνθρώπος, or human, according to the δεινότερον, which is the dreadful, but it's translated as the wonderful in the standard interpretations. But Heidegger is translating as Unheimlich. I think this is like, so remember, we have this structure. The Unheimlich is like Unheimlich, but the Heimat itself is related to the Geheimnis, the sort of concealed thing, the hidden thing. Remain hidden, says the old Heraclitus. Yeah, so this question arises with this human according to the dreadful. So it's like if you think of Moses going up to Mount Horeb or something like that, the burning bush, yes, they shall be as they shall be, and so on, or according to some I am that I am. That's the philosophic version. That's the version influenced by the Septuagint. I am that I am, that shows up in the King James version. But just before King James, Tyndale said it the other way. In other words, that scholar, it wasn't for lack of scholarship that they put it that way, but they put it that way because they preferred the Platonic version. So, is this man not of lawlessness but rather of dread, or Unheimlich? Is that what Trump is? That's a good question, I think, in a way, because again, we could address this. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. But we could try to address this question through rereading the Building Dwelling Thinking. And then, seeing how Heidegger sees, this type of aballing or whatever, this type of thing happening of the building of that which allows for the primary choices. But remember, let me sort of end it this way. We're saying, like, one thing is you could do is rational probability outcome expectations, and then when you get a lot of outliers that you don't like, you change your expectations and try to hone in better, or change some factor. That's one way of thinking about the future. Then another way is some kind of sensation or something like this. Traders that look at the fluctuations of the war of algorithms on that's showing up at the massive scale on the screen. Or there could be another. Could be some other more basic ways that we're choosing directions forward. Of course, we do in daily life too. It's just sometimes this field, maybe in a way it could be described as this field where one says, as one gets older, then one says, I can't do that because I have to be responsible, or something like that. But so at the same time, one could say this sort of Das Man positioning, where one doesn't do the things that are supposedly due to the fact that the brain hasn't come into perfect shape yet before age 27 or something, or whatever they say. But one could also say, maybe this is also a lack of courage that people have as they get into middle age. Less courage in a certain way. Is it more responsibility, or is it less courage? People have to, I'm saying in the sense that one says, I have to worry about groceries or whatever, so I can't, I can't do things like that. One could argue about that field of space that opens up there, where one is kind of looking at the difficulties one will get into if one goes down a certain path from a larger kind of perspective. And then one could say, even in seeing that, one could still go along with it. And there's all these different ways, but that's I think a primary one that affects almost everyone. Sort of some in between of this type of decision making, that the light in which we see everything plays some role in the making the path. Then, if you don't have some presupposition like Descartes has, you just think you treat that question directly as involving this Ereignis, or light of being. If you have the Cartesian type of view, then you try something that has to do with perception, and how there's this back and forth between the perception or the supposedly real thing. But the problem with that is the world that's real to us is what we mean by the world that's real to us is what we first come across. So that this every time we try to look for a different reality aside from the one we're already here, to say this is the that's a certain type of particle accounts for the base reality or something. We have a presupposition that goes away from what we already know. It's not that it's what we already know. That's what we mean by reality, and then we try to have some special theory. That's the world we live in. I guess that's that could be regarded as Heidegger's presupposition in a way, to say phenomenology shows that the world, but Heidegger's not dependent on that. That's part of the reason why the whole Dasein and so on account never can be taken as an ontic account as it's usually taken. Like it's just Heidegger's got a philosophy, just as others said, as Aristotle had philosophy, but rather in the background is this awareness that we can't give ourselves, in a way, this basic light of being, because the sun is different than all the colors. So that if we try to answer the question, and then the sun itself, even though it's different than all the colors, is still in a way part of that picture. So just like Heidegger saying, all beings, we can't say, for instance, that being is, I guess in a way it's a traditional Catholic picture in a certain way, because we can't say the being of beings is the good or something like that, or the being of beings is, in Aristotelian terms, the being of beings is the actus purus, which holds up. The being of beings is it's on analogy with the light that allows everything to be seen. There's this actus purus, which allows everything to remain always in being. But then you have that same actus purus is again, in a certain way, pictured as a being. So Heidegger's aware of that, and he's saying, what actually is being? You keep trying to tell me what being is, but every time you try to tell me what being is, you give me something like, being is the cogito sum, the I am. Or you say being is the actus purus, which upholds all being, or something. You give me some specific being, which is supposed to be that which everything else is seen in the light of. It's Unheimlich here in this sense, I think, or dreadful, like the encounter of Moses with the burning bush or whatever. That's Hashem. And Moses was stiff-necked man, or as it were, he was, it's better to say it this way, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, because Moses wasn't that, he didn't really want to go along with this plan for the new Heimat. Actually, it wasn't that. So in this way, I would say the Quran distorts this, and it makes everything seem softer, milder, and this is not the true dread-filled question about the Heimat. It's rather that this becomes something in Allah's domains or something, but it's not really the moment it is for the Hebrew Bible. Then we could ask, from this point of view of the dreadfulness, or the Tehran, with the Unheimlichkeit. Is Trump interfering with this basic issuance of the Geworfen, as it were, of this given light, in which everything appears only, again, by appealing to this notion of the light, it's, again, we're doing something like this perception and reality thing, where we miss where, even though I can't give a proper sort of approach to it, I just say in like a large, vague way, Heidegger is shown in great detail and shown as, again, why all this other people who have tried to give the curriculum for our universities have sort of made some errors, and then it leads to people like Daniel Dennett or whatever, who are caught in basically Cartesian thinking, but then claim not to be, and other such things. It leads to that the sciences fall into it, so it's sort of the obscurity of technique, or the white abyss of Nietzsche. So it's like, there's all kinds of things. Let's end it with this thought, actually. Let's end it with sort of a boss from like notion. It's like, right now there's 5 million peer-reviewed articles that come out like every year. But very soon you'll have peer-reviewed articles between the bots, right? So you'll have trillions and trillions, maybe like vastly more, peer-reviewed articles coming out, almost endless. But only the super bots, the bots that make themselves to scour these articles, could like digest them and get anything out of them. It's like a hive of this, big information, or however they call it. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, actually Thiel is right. It's like, it's simply, everything is irreducibly different. So it's like, it's just incomparable. It's not a question of, the numbers get to a certain point, like Hegel says, the quantity passes over into quality. It's like, it's just the incomparable difference at some point. That's a very interesting question of the whitest abyss, and that especially because all these things have, within certain limits, every paper those AIs will write, all the trillions and a trillion to the trillionth power or whatever, papers will have, within certain limits, they'll be saying things that are true, useful about the world, and probably they'll start to have their own bots. So you could see, obviously, they would have their own bots out running experiments, but there'll be special experiments that go along with furthering notions that have come up in these research papers. And then then they could gather data in that way, in a totally automated way, which would at the same time basically couldn't be communicated what they were aiming at. But one could just watch, and it would be interesting to see what would come out of it. But in any case, that's an aspect of the whitest abyss, and the whitest abyss is sort of like, is there in a way, Nietzsche himself, I mean, if you have all these different paths, and I don't just mean paths understood by positivistic science, and then they say, this counts as scientific fact or something, but I mean, they have all these different type of knowledges and paths and things that within certain limits are of some value. You'll get into this, there's so much Apollonian light. That's the whitest abyss. Is there also the leap? So is there also that all these knowledges could somehow be left away from? Because I think that's sort of what Nietzsche's getting at, and what he says, sort of like, nihilism, this European nihilism is sort of like in a way, it's like something. It's announcing something. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be as though some messenger that's come to say that the real thing is to be expected soon. And Nietzsche says this life-giving lie is being given because the other choice was to be like Leopardi, who says had given himself over to being sort of above everything. The sublimity of its sort of sort of an Edgar Allan Poe sort of way of looking at things, but without if you could subtract the creepiness, but it's just at home at that level of sort of I think of that Edgar Allan Poe about the somewhere in along the Nile, I think. I think it's an evil of fable or something like that. This great heights, looking down from the great heights, remembering, of course, Jesus' encounter with the tempter. But yeah, in any case, one could judge this effects of Trump not only. Let's just end it this way, just to be clear. One could judge of Trump not only from the point of view of has he gone along, and de facto is he helping this sort of formerly Robert Kagan, James Angleton tack. Yes, you could make a case like that, but you could also, there's all these different ways you could ask whether Trump is a disruptor, and we don't have to regard I mean, we don't, it's sort of like we're also asking is this whole moment in disruption. In a way, it's free of Trump. We could just ask, are we in this type of far-reaching moment that breaks into new lights, new suns, which light everything.